If you're anything like me, you enjoy slapping around the undead. It's simply a good time. Throw into the mix some looting of buildings and progression, and you've got yourself a solid foundation. If you're like me, you also don't like to spend money. Well, have I got a game for you? This led me to trying out Dead Frontier 2, and boy, was it an experience. Let's talk about it. Hello and welcome. My name is CodeYo. I make survival, crafting, and MMO content. Do me a favor, if you like what you see or hear, please do consider dropping a like or a sub, and of course, leave me a sweet love message down below. He gets the idea. Dead Frontier 2 is a dark and atmospheric online zombie survival game that is free to play and available on Steam. Scavenge for supplies, level up and spend skill points, and trade with other players through an online auction house. You can play and progress alone or join others as you complete missions, endure challenging events, and survive in this dark and gritty world. It's a great game in a free package, and it has a lot of promise, but it also falls flat in a lot of interestingly basic areas. I started off my journey with a somewhat basic character creation. Nothing fancy, no sliders, and somewhat limiting customization options. But I found myself thinking, that's okay, this is free. And that's a line that I repeated to myself quite a few times during my play sessions. I spawned into this bleak-looking police station carrying a 2x4 and a flashlight on my shirt. With these, I felt prepared to rid the world of zombies. Optimistic, yes. Up for the challenge? Absolutely. And I began that journey. I grabbed up all the missions I could and I set out. As I left the station, I was greeted with an even more depressing image than the police station. The world was in chaos. Cars were on fire, zombies were roaming the streets, and the only fighting force left was the army of 2x4 wielding new players. I set off through the wreck-filled streets to head to my first mission. It was something simple: kill some infected zombies, retrieve a man's wedding ring, and get this poor soul some antidepressants, which makes sense, I can't blame him. After fighting my way to the location, I entered this building. I was instantly greeted by a hallway full of sleeping undead. I pulled out my trusty 2x4 and I got to work. Somewhat slowly though, the melee weapons in this game aren't the most in-depth. They lack a layer of excitement or uniqueness. 2 swings and that's it. You left click for a longer swing, you right click for a shorter swing, but with a longer recovery animation, and that's it. There's no rotating animations or even basic combos. You sort of quickly realize the best thing to do is slap them once, do a little quick spin to create some distance between you, and then slap them again, repeat this until one of you is dead. Later, I did discover chainsaw type melee weapons, which I will say is definitely a step up, but we'll talk about that in a moment. I went through the hallways slaying the undead, exploring each and every room I came across, looting these bodies, opening drawers, and exploring this dark world. And I found myself being immersed. I was impressed by the grotesque layer of detail on each one. That with a solid amount of mob variety. Of course, there were a bunch of zombies that we had seen repeated, but there were well over more than I had expected going into a free game made by a small team. And honestly, more mob variety than I've encountered in paid titles. Ones that have been around for years and have much bigger audiences. I continued to scour this building even after I'd finished the mission, because it's hard for me to turn away from a good old looting fiesta. It didn't take long to realize that inventory management was going to be a big part of this game. You start with 20 slots that can be increased with either skill points or perks on gear, but even then, the slots still fill up pretty quickly. Thankfully, you have certain statuses you have to maintain, like calories and hydration, so I was often able to make room in my inventory by eating consumables along the way, just to keep these stats high. But even then, I had to start leaving gear behind. And on the topic of inventory, I think that this is the biggest weakness in the game. The inventory system, to be blunt, sucks. It's not good. It doesn't fit any traditional system you've seen. It's simply a wall of text. No slots, no icons, nothing to differentiate one piece of gear from another without hovering over its name and looking at the stats. This gets even worse when you find a piece of gear that you think might be an upgrade, and there's no easy way to do a quick side-by-side comparison. You have to hover over your equipped piece, memorize 10 plus lines of text, then scroll down to the new piece, and compare its line of text to the ones you hopefully just memorized. Eventually it becomes a little bit easier since certain numbers stand out, or if your weapon is a higher grade, it might highlight a couple lines that are improved, such as a rare gun might have a highlighted headshot damage number to show you that it has an increased number to the stat. But still, it's such a basic feature that's overwhelmingly helpful, and not having it absolutely lessens the player experience. I ended up being in this building for well over an hour, and I loved it. Aside from the mentioned inventory distaste and melee combat quickly becoming stale, it felt as if I had been solo raiding a zombie-filled dungeon this whole time. And I liked that. I finished up and set on my way back to the police station. When I made it, I turned in my missions, collected my goodies, and then I listed all of my extra medical supplies and consumables on the trading post. To my surprise, when I logged in the next day, everything had sold, and it wasn't even as if I had undercut anybody. I was thoroughly surprised to see such an active auction house, and that gave me hope for the health of this game. I repeated this mission loop for a while. Accept a mission, run here, kill these while looting these and searching for this, and then return. And I have to say that it only took a few missions for me to grow a bit bored of this loop. The problem was, each building was massive. I could spend over an hour searching 20 different rooms each on 5 different floors, and maybe not even come out with anything exciting. Oftentimes the mission was completed within the first floor or two, but I couldn't pull myself away because I wanted to find the boss room. I wanted to find a unique, fun fight, or I'd convince myself that the next room would have the good piece of loot that I was so eagerly awaiting for. I started to worry that this was just the progression, and I didn't like that. So I started to try other things in the game, things that the game wasn't directly telling me to do. I started looting buildings that weren't relevant to any missions. You could still enter things even if your mission doesn't require it, and it seems like every, if not most, buildings can be entered. And I have to say, this was more fun. They were significantly smaller, oftentimes just one floor with 5 or so rooms, each time having a boss room, which was huge. The boss fights were much more engaging, and they always dropped a rare piece of loot. I was missing out on some of the experience and money rewards for missions by doing this, but I was having way more fun. At this point, I also noticed these purple squares on the maps. These are real-time events, things that exist for a short amount of time and that any players can go to and complete for some generous rewards. Now this is where I started to feel this game shine. Here is a fight that Nicole and I had come across on the way back from a mission. The music, the intensity, the increase of mob density, and the zombies moving quicker, it was fun. It was a more dramatic fight. We actually had to kite into position properly. It was infinitely more engaging than what the mission loop had become. So we started to engage in more events. We did another one where I came into this dark alleyway and I got flocked by crows. I had to kill a certain amount of them, but my only enemy wasn't the crows. The nearby zombies had become more aggressive and agitated and started to run at us in larger crowds. We had to fight them off while swinging at these crows because, well, either I suck at shooting or they're just really hard to shoot. Probably both. But we had to balance killing the crows and killing these zombies, and it was fun. I did another one where I was tasked with killing this named zombie named Fingerhead. He looks exactly like how you would imagine, and he ended up being a lot tougher than I expected, but it was good to know that there were more difficult challenges awaiting me. But one of the best events that I tried brings me back to the introduction of Chainsaw and Hedgers. I saw an event that was to kill 50 zombies in this little area. I went there and I was instantly swarmed by faster moving hordes. I pulled out my trusty hedger and I got to work. I mowed these dudes down, and it was awesome. It seemed to have a slight stun duration to it, so as long as I piled up the zombies and kept hitting each one, I was pretty safe. So I ran around stacking up fat chunks of experience. So chainsaws, A+ to you. Way more fun than the other melee weapons, and somewhat of a redeeming quality for melee. Later that night, the outpost was raided by zombies. Lots of players came to defend the doors while the undead rushed to try to destroy it. We had to defend it for, I think, like 20 or so minutes, maybe a little bit more. It wasn't too difficult, but it was a ton of experience since we were killing so many zombies. Once we successfully defended the outpost from the invasion, we were all rewarded with a chunk of experience, money, and a 4-hour buff that increased our stats and experience gained by like 50%, which was huge. It was a great way to incentivize players to group together and come do this live challenge. Now for my final bit, and the most fun I had in this game, it was a randomly occurring event. I was heading down this dark road, returning from a mission, and I kind of had like this meme moment. Why do I hear boss music? Out of nowhere, this intense music started playing, and this giant, grotesque mass of flesh comes out and just starts walking at me. Yeah, okay, I know that walking isn't exactly the scariest thing on the planet, but just trust me, okay? I was spooked. It was kind of spooky. It only took a few shots to realize that this thing was tough. The weird part was, it wasn't interested in anybody else, only me. It completely ignored all of the other players who were trying to fight it, and just kept focus on me, just continuously walking right at me. Even as other players joined in and tried to kill it, loading it full of lead, smacking around with melee weapons. At one point we had like 3 guys just sitting on him with chainsaws. Nothing. He wasn't budging. But anytime I got too close, he'd thwack me and I'd lose like half of my health. So it turned into this game of me running around limping because now I'm dying, and 8 to 10 other players trying to beat up this massive zombie. We tried this for probably 15 or so minutes. The entire time I'm just limping around pathetically, bleeding out, and going through my stash of ammo. We ended up wondering if this thing was actually killable, so we Googled giant zombie following me, can't kill it, Dead Frontier 2. And we found out that it's a rare event called the Stalker, a behemoth of a zombie, unkillable, who keeps chasing you until you return to an outpost or a police station, at which point a message pops up saying congratulations, you've escaped the Stalker, and you get a fat chunk of experience and money. So while we wasted a lot of resources just to realize that we couldn't kill it, it was fun. That is a gaming memory that I'll always have, and that's the best thing that you can gain from playing anything. A good memory. It doesn't matter how high quality the game is, how polished its systems are, how in-depth the character creation is or the combat is. None of that matters. If it doesn't stick a core gaming moment into your brain forever, was it worth it? Maybe so, but this is something that I've realized over the years. Having played a slew of way too many games, I realized that a game that creates a good memory is a game that keeps being fun way after you've stopped playing it. And that's what this created. After playing this game for roughly 20 hours, here are my thoughts so far. Pros. The game does a lot right, a lot of which is surprisingly good. For starters, the atmosphere is stellar, and not just for a free-to-play standard. The dark, gritty mood set by dim lights, the use of fog, your vision being funneled in around your flashlight, vehicles on fire, silhouettes of zombies in the distance, it all helps create a well-rounded atmosphere that makes you feel like you've stepped into the end of the world. In a good way somehow. With that, the soundscape adds to this as well. The sounds are clear and impactful, they are queued up with zombies spawning and events being triggered. Even the eerie sound of sirens in the distance just adds such an immersive layer. Small details like shooting a gun into a bathroom and having the sounds echo really adds to this. It was nice. The progression system has potential to feel very rewarding and can be somewhat addictive. There's a thrill to gaining the next skill point, and an excitement when thinking about how much stronger you'll be in 10 to 15 levels from now. This doesn't mean that all forms of progression were fun though. With that, the most enjoyable form of progression for me were the events. Seeing a nearby time-limited unique objective and then running there with other players or by yourself was just fun. Most of the unique and interesting fights or zombies that I found came from these events. Doing these instead of missions will make you miss out on a good portion of looting, but you can make a solid amount of money doing these and then buy whatever you need from the trade post. The gameplay is more flexible than it initially makes you believe. You can just do the mission loop if it suits your fancy, or you can completely ignore it, just do the events, raid random buildings, kill bosses, and you'll still gain experience, money, and everything necessary. One redeeming quality of missions is that they reset and synchronize daily. What I mean is, if I log in right now with a friend, we will have the same exact missions available to us. It doesn't matter how far into the game we are, what level we are, or what missions we've already completed. Today's missions are these. Exact same objectives, exact same locations, so we can just accept everything from the same outpost and go play together. And I think that that's a really solid concept. The game does an amazing job of not punishing you for not playing enough. It makes it really easy to come back whenever you want. If I'm in the mood to go shoot some zombies, I can comfortably load this up and just go play for a couple of hours without having to set aside time to figure out what I was doing or worry about catching up or anything like that. It's very easy to start and stop. One thing that adds to this is that the devs host a lot of events. Fairly often you'll find increased experience gain or lockpicking chance weekend events, so you can just plan your game time around these. Moving forward, that's how I'm going to be playing. I'll keep an eye out for these events and just hop in for a handful of hours with some friends when I see something going on. One more pro that I'll say is the cash shop. The cash shop is entirely cosmetics, except for one thing that's an experience booster. But the experience booster, in my opinion, is not even necessary because they host so many events giving you extra experience gained. So if you want to support the devs, you absolutely can, progress a little bit faster, but it doesn't necessarily make it pay to win since there's no real competitive scene. So let's talk about the cons. The first thing that comes to mind is one that you encounter right away, and that's the melee weapons. They feel repetitive, slow and sluggish. You're locked into two swing types, left or right click. They're both the same duration, but one has a quicker swing and a longer recovery time, and the other one's the opposite. There's just two swings. It's slow and doesn't create an enjoyable combat experience, especially when compared to the range weapons, which honestly felt great. As mentioned, the chainsaw did improve this quite a bit, but it's a bit of a bummer that so many melee weapons, other than the chainsaw, just didn't quite do it for me. The next one is pretty big, and as mentioned, it's the biggest letdown in this game for myself, and it's because it lacks such a basic quality of life feature, and that has to do with the inventory system. For starters, it's just a list of colored text. It's a mess trying to keep track of the items in your inventory. You can't lock or flag items, so everything blends together into one giant wall of text that's just hard to differentiate. You have to spend extra time to make sure that you're equipping the right item and not accidentally selling or scrapping an upgrade, which does go into the next inventory quality of life con. There's no easy stat comparison for items. Most games have a simple hold shift or control feature that lets you compare the stats of items. This doesn't have that. So you have to scroll up to your equipped item, memorize 10 plus lines of stats, scroll down to find the one that you're hoping is an upgrade, and mentally compare the numbers. And then repeat this for each slot. It got to the point where I couldn't even be bothered, so I stopped worrying about upgrades unless it was the complete next tier of gear. Say a level 5 weapon instead of level 1, or a 10 instead of 5. You get the idea. So even for a free game, it was very disappointing that it lacks this. Sadly, a pretty big con is the mission system, which kind of feels like the biggest main progression in the game. At least that's how it feels to a newer player. And it's for one main reason. The locations that you go to for missions are the biggest buildings that you'll come across. And I'm all for looting large, intricate buildings, but if every single mission is go to this big building, explore these 20 rooms each on these 5 different floors, it just becomes repetitive. Especially if there's no real big reward at the end other than finding your quest item and going back for just some simple experience and gold. It didn't feel quite worth my time. I will say that these were more enjoyable with another player. It didn't really add any sort of game mechanic or anything, but for some reason having one more person with you just made it a little bit more fun. And it was a bit of a bummer when compared to looting random buildings, which felt way more enjoyable because the boss rooms were much earlier in the building and you got rare loot right away. So these are my main cons for the game. Yes, the pros list is bigger, but keep in mind that this is a free-to-play game. If this were a AAA title, my pros and cons list would be like drastically different. But for a free game, I'm thoroughly impressed. This is a game that I'm going to continue playing even after uploading this video, and I will definitely be hopping on occasionally to try out new events or play something quick and easy with friends. 2 things that I didn't really touch on, but they do exist, so I want to mention them. PvP and cosmetics. I didn't get to experience either one of these because I didn't spend money, and I didn't get far enough to want a PvP. Both of these exist, but I don't know to what degree. I do know that the PvP scene is getting slightly more active as they're adding a leaderboard and such, but I don't believe it's tied to any sort of rewards. I think it's just for fun. And then of course, cosmetics. Didn't get to look at that one, but I have seen some colored armor as well as a wolf head. I don't know if that was a Halloween thing, but just know that that exists too. What'd you guys think of the video? This is a new format I want to try out. I've been wanting to do first impressions and reviews of a lot of different games, but I don't think I'm really good at the live reacting format, so I wanted to try this storytelling format instead, followed by a bit of an overview of my thoughts of the game. What'd you think? That's all for this video, guys. If you enjoyed the content, please do consider dropping a like or a sub. It helps more than you know. And of course, any love messages down below are always appreciated. That's all, guys. Thanks for watching. Peace!